Council.
Recording in progress.
I will now call the Thursday, October 17th, Borough Council business meeting to order. Excuse me, you want to lead us in the pledge?
Hey folks, you're still muted.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
One moment. All right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will you call the roll?
President Bush,
Here.
Vice President Rickards,
Here.
Councilmember Winston,
Here.
Councilmember Burek,
Here.
Councilmember Spear,
Here.
Councilmember Galdini,
Here.
Councilmember Salmonson,
Here.
Mayor Deutsch.
Here.
All right. So I do have some comments today. First, I'd like to make some comments about 201 Sabine Avenue. I'd like to summarize Council's position on the 201 Sabine property and the upshot of the discussion that we had last month during executive session. So 201 Sabine is a property that consists of, right now, about 3/4 of an acre of parkland, a 1 acre parking lot, and 1.5 acres of buildings that are rented to commercial tenants. This situation is unsustainable in the long run due to deferred maintenance costs for the buildings. A full renovation would cost well over $1 million and would require the tenants to leave the building. This would create expenses that could not be covered by the rent. Council's preference is to expand the green space available to the community by removing buildings on the property and making that space into parkland. However, this project would also be expensive, with demolition costs alone estimated at $1.3 million in 2022, not including any park-related improvements, and would result in a significant loss in short-term revenue from the building rentals. While Council would seek grants for this project, we still anticipate major borough expenses. As a result, Council is considering whether to continue to designate a portion of the property for a commercial mixed use, anchored by Wonder Spring, a nonprofit child care center who is our current major tenant on the property, and use the revenue to cover some of the costs of creating the new park space, or whether to turn all the space into parkland and rely solely on an increase in taxes to finance the new park space. So in order to make that decision, Council needs a better understanding of how much money it could raise through a continuation of the commercial role of the property. So in the past, we considered an RFP process in partnership with the Montgomery County Redevelopment Authority to gauge interest in the property. However, after further discussions, we will not be partnering with the RDA or proceeding with an RFP process. Instead, should we decide to continue to allow commercial use of the property, we will simply subdivide the property and sell the portion where the commercial use will occur. We've determined that the best path to gather information will be for borough staff to prepare some plans for subdivision of the property and then to have a formal appraisal done on those subdivision plans. At this time, we have no timetable for an actual subdivision of the property. This is solely to allow us to get an estimate of the value of the property. So after receiving an appraisal, we would be in a position to determine whether or not to actually subdivide the property and proceed with a sale. And at that point, we will have a larger conversation. So accordingly, I am directing staff to prepare 3 plans for subdividing 1, 1.5, and 2 acres of the property facing Montgomery Avenue. In keeping with Council's earlier resolutions, these plans must allow us to dedicate more space to parkland than is currently the case for the site. These steps will allow us to move toward a final decision on the property, which in turn will let us engage in a much-needed master planning process for the expanded green space on the site. I have one other unrelated comment, which is that our Historic District Act has now been in place for about 3 years. I am planning to submit a few changes to the list of contributing and non-contributing resources to the HARB for review and for Council to consider in November. I think I've spoken to Council members about this. Does anybody have any objections with me submitting a list of properties to the HARB based on discussions we've had internally? Okay, so that'll get picked up at the HARB and then it'll come back to Council probably next month. That's it for my comments. Madam Mayor?
We're in October, and I would like to issue my annual, reminder that we're heading into, Halloween season. There's gonna be a lot of events in the borough. There's also gonna be trick-or-treaters going around. I really ask that people, pay very close attention to their driving in the borough, particularly at night, keep your lights on. And just please be very mindful that there are a lot of kids and people walking around in the evenings. And let's just be very safe out there. So that's it.
All right. Mr. Borough Manager?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a brief 55-slide presentation that I'd like to make tonight. I'm kidding. No. I don't have much to report on the draft budget aside from we're in pretty good shape. I circulated to council and the mayor all of the draft 2025 budgets for review and consideration. I also followed that up with some calendar invites for some small group meetings to discuss the budgets in next week. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation with you all next week and the following Monday. And I am planning on presenting the draft budgets publicly at the work session in November.
Okay, so public information will come out in advance of that
Yes.
November meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Walko, some updates on the zoning hearing board?
Yes, so there are two matters that are scheduled before the Narberth Zoning Hearing Board upcoming on October 24th of this month, this year. The first matter is 41 Narbrook Park, and the second is 13 Elmwood Avenue. It is routine that when matters come before the Zoning Hearing Board that they come to first council for consideration as to whether or not council wants to remain neutral to the application, support an application, or send a solicitor in opposition to the application. So that's the sort of the decision before council today on these two applications. I know Kevin Walsh is on Zoom
I'm here.
related to these, and I maybe would defer to Kevin for a little bit more details related to each of the applications. But 13 Elmwood Avenue, you may remember, was a property that was before council for the subdivision, that irregular flag lot subdivision. So this would be pertaining to trying to build on that particular lot. Kevin, would you mind giving council a rundown, just a brief overview of the two applications?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I actually have most of the drawings up for 13 Elmwood, if I can share my screen.
So we'll do 13 Elmwood first.
Okay, sounds good. We'll let you know when we got that.
Kevin,
I think, okay. All right. So this is the actual plan for 13 Elmwood. As you see, there is the existing flag lot, which is prohibited under the new zoning code, but this is a pre-existing nonconformity, and they're kind of going to make a pennant by chopping off the rear part of 99 Elmwood into basically almost right down the middle here. So the way that our zoning code is set up, because we prohibit flag lots, no matter what is to be developed on this lot, it would trigger some sort of special exceptions or variances. So in general, while it sounds complicated that they're asking for 4 variances, they're all triggered off the idea that the house is oriented parallel to Elmwood Avenue rather than perpendicular as desired. And by doing so, they don't have, due to the definitions, a primary frontage line that would be going parallel with Elmwood, and in turn they have to go perpendicular to Elmwood, and that triggers all the 4 variances. So realistically, if this house was turned 90 degrees, they'd only need 1 variance, and it would be for not meeting the minimum building frontage build out. It's 35 instead of 42. But realistically, it's the orientation and the pre-existing condition of the flag lot that has them going for multiple variances here.
Thank you, Kevin. So I guess the question is, does council want to take a position on this application seeking the variances as a result of the orientation of the house on the flag lot?
Yeah, and for new council members, so the zoning hearing board is independent of council, so if we can send solicitor to make an argument one way or the other, if we so choose, but typically, the borough takes no position on this and lets the zoning hearing board make its determination. So that should be our default stance, is we are not going to take a position, in my opinion. Given that, does anybody want to make a case for the borough? Okay, I don't see any appetite on borough council to take a position here.
All right, thank you. And then the next one, 41 Narborough Park, which is, I think, just a single-family residence. Was it a deck or an extension, addition?
They're going to do a one-story rear addition. It's kind of like a sunroom. Most of the walls are glass, and they're just asking for a simple rear yard variance. That one's pretty straightforward.
We have to worry about impervious surface at all, just because it's Narborough Park?
I mean, they'll have to eventually get a grading permit through Eric, but that's separate from that matter.
Okay, I don't see any action on council, so. All right, thank you, Kevin, and thanks, Solicitor Walker.
All right, so we'll take that as the council's remaining neutral on those two applications.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
All right, let's move on to the committee reports. Finance and Administration.
Thank you. We, in addition to monthly bills, and we had a first look, or just a first indication of the audit update, which I'm sure, the audit 2003 update, which will we get, is that an item for later in the agenda?
No, it's not.
Okay.
I think we will eventually have.
It was circulated to council this afternoon, and I'm trying to arrange a time for the auditor to come before council to provide a review.
Okay.
So probably next month.
I'm hoping for November, yes.
Aside from that, we continue our discussions of boards and commissions reviews, and our communications plan review is focusing on websites, social media, all manner of news and methods we use to get the word out in its very early stages. And the rules of council, any day now, probably next month.
So those are ready for council to approve those, right?
John.
That's
Not
good, John.
quite.
Okay. When you're saying any day now, though, that's going to be the next council step.
Right,
It's going to
yeah.
come to us for.
Yes.
We want to get it on the agenda for November,
Okay.
but John has to.
It's a busy time of the year, so we'll
I
see.
know.
All right. Infrastructure.
So, after the last infrastructure meeting, I think we got some good news from the project that the Amtrak executive vice president who had to sign the contract or sign the agreement signed it. Is that correct? I don't know.
Yes, we have a fully executed contract from Amtrak.
Do you have a question, Cindy?
No, those were excited jazz hands.
So, all the other stuff falling in behind that is proceeding. The one piece of good news that I did hear or gleaned out of that meeting was that while we do have to wait for another bridge project to complete before we can actually do the bridge replacement component of the project. What was that?
Boot Road.
Boot Road. There's a lot of preparatory work that is actually construction work that will happen before the part that, requires the bridge to be removed. So,
Utility work.
Yes.
Okay.
Catenary structures for Amtrak have to be built, removed from the bridge. There's a lot of construction that has to happen that you'll see prior to the bridge actually being reconstructed.
okay, then we discussed the paving plan, and I believe the work that was done this year has been completed.
Yes.
And the next projects they're looking at are Iona and Meeting House. I'm looking at Jeff because I want to make sure I have that right. Is that right, Jeff?
Yeah, that's a portion of what we're looking to pave in 25.
Right, and then, after that, some decisions have to be made as part of the capital budgeting project about whether we, just use the solid fuels funding, or whether we, accelerate the process and use, money out of the capital budgets to speed up the process. But that decision doesn't have to be made, right now, because we've got, projects that we're doing in the capital.
Still got money in the kitty.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, there was, or the fuel tank that we have out back, is no longer. It's developed.
No longer functional, it's still there, no longer functional.
No longer functional,
Yep.
and, Public Works is working on a plan, to provide, fuel for, or fire vehicles, which now have to, drive over to Lower Merion, transfer station, is that
Yes.
right? And, to get fueled up, and they've got some tanks that they've been using to fill, some of the Public Works equipment. So, a plan is being developed, to remind me, Jeff, what was the name of that, the fuel cubes?
Yes.
That we would either have to go drive over to Lower Merion to fill, or perhaps we could have the fuel delivered here. So we would still be storing fuel on site, but we wouldn't have an underground tank anymore.
Yeah, I think we have 2 agenda items tonight.
We do.
So we'll
Yeah,
talk
it's
more
part of
about
budget amendment number 3, and we'll discuss that.
that. And also this PICO grant, right? the
Yes.
Okay.
Right, and the only final comment is that we were doing, our engineer was doing some work to analyze potentials for the stormwater bump outs, and that work has commenced. I assume this was 3 weeks ago, so I assume that's,
I think it's almost done,
there you go.
so, yep. I have not seen it yet. They're
Yeah,
finishing up some things. We'll be meeting in the next week or 2 to review it.
yeah, great, okay, and that's it.
All right, thank you, Aaron. With health and safety?
Yes, so we discussed 2 different traffic studies that we did for, one was Windsor and Dudley intersection, that was a request for a 4-way stop sign there. The engineer reviewed it and said it did not warrant a stop sign, but that he would recommend considering possibly removing some of the parking spaces to increase the sight lines before doing a stop sign there, or a 4-way stop sign there. Also the 200 block of Price, there was a request there from the residents over concerns about the road was too narrow, and then it affected cars backing out of their driveways, and caused some problems there. So some of the there's a traffic study done on that, and it is actually more narrow than other roads. And so the staff will be reaching out to the residents to talk about the options. The options are basically to either remove parking on one side of the street on Price Avenue, or change the direction to one-way. Changing the direction would require another traffic study to study the circulation effects and things like that. Those were discussion items. And then we also discussed traffic calming on Iona Avenue. We discussed a plan that the traffic engineer put forward for a temporary bump out on Iona Avenue. And this was because the original plan that they put forward, it was for a stormwater bump out, which costed
125.
I think it was even more than that, it was 150 or...
Oh, well, you're right, it was 125 after we reduced.
Right,
Yeah.
And we weren't sure if that was the best location.
1,000, by the way, not 125, 125, thousands.
we questioned whether that was the best location for a stormwater bump out. The stormwater bump outs are required by the DEP, but the engineer is currently working on a prioritized list of where the optimal locations are, and we don't believe that that's the optimal location, so we're looking at other options there. We also talked about possible speed humps on Meeting House Lane as part of the traffic calming. And then we're also, we're going to be discussing later as an action item, expanded parking on Haverford Avenue. That will be parking that extends all the way from Essex Avenue to Wynwood Avenue. And that would be on-street parallel parking and would provide additional spaces and could possibly offset any reduction of spaces if we move forward with the Station Square plans, which would remove some of those parking spaces and create a pedestrian plaza. And then EAC, we talked about carbon pricing change. We decided to defer that to next year. Carbon pricing change is something that was recommended by the EAC and is would be in line with other municipalities, and basically it pays into a green fund every time we buy
Non-gas.
like an ICE type vehicle or something like that. And
Yeah, any non-EV
Right.
that's purchased, there's a calculation based upon the engine size, vehicle miles traveled, and miles per gallon. Put it into a spreadsheet, calculate it, and it generates a fee that we would then transfer from the capital fund into that green fund.
We're charging ourselves this
Yes.
fee, and applying it toward green programs.
But because we don't know the budget details yet, we decided to defer to next year. And then the Police Advisory Committee, we're working on a charge. The committee provided feedback, and now it's under review by the Police Advisory Committee. And I think that's it.
Excellent.
Did you want to do an update on the master park plan, or?
Yeah, I think we should probably get it, since there was a major meeting.
Before you go there, just to clarify one thing on the price traffic situation. Jean said something about not having parking on one side of the street. It wouldn't be the entire block. That, so we wouldn't be eliminating parking on that entire block of Price. What they're suggesting is there's certain areas where we would do it in such a way, and it might be partially on one side of the street and partially on the other, so that it based on sort of the sight lines of the driveways and where the problem areas are, so.
Yeah, but like a pull off that so you can pass.
Yeah, exactly, so you eliminate, say, a space over here so people can pull over, slow the traffic down if people are coming the other way. There's essentially two issues that we were told about. One is it's narrow enough so that cars coming in both directions at the same time. It's very tight, and especially if you have two oversized vehicles, they cannot pass each other. And so you need to create some pull-aside spaces.
So was it the, I don't know if you had a discussion on sort of the cost benefit of some of these changes. I mean, they're significant, right?
Yeah.
Have you determined that, in your opinion, these are worth it? Like, it's gonna be worth it to reduce parking, or it's gonna be worth it to switch to one way?
That's why we're going to the neighbors.
Okay, you're gonna be talking to the
Yeah.
neighbors. Okay, great. That
The
sounds.
charges, the neighbors are gonna have to decide, either live with the situation as it is, lose some parking on that block, or potentially change it to one way. Probably going one way is the least attractive alternative, because there are unintended consequences.
I do like the idea of reaching out to the neighbors who are gonna be most affected by this and seeing what they have to say. Okay.
So the Norwood Parks plan, obviously there was a community meeting this month that's recorded as online for folks to review if they want to. We also had a special call meeting of the Master Parks Plan Study Committee where we discussed the three different spaces that are included in the planning effort. But I think going into the meeting, there was a lot of consensus around Elm Grove Park. So The committee voted on kind of recommendations for each space, so that the consultant can consider the recommendations going into the planning commission. So the next step is it goes to planning commission, which will provide feedback, and if they have any recommendations, they can provide it then. Then it'll come to council for a presentation before the end of the year, and will come back to us for some sort of action at the beginning of next year. So in terms of the study committee, they said the recommendation on Elm Grove is basically that the version of it as shown looked good. We had extensive discussion about the Narberth Park layout that was shown, and jump in if I'm misremembering any of this, because there was an extensive discussion, but I think our recommendations were basically for the baseball fields, basketball courts, parking lot to generally remain in its existing configuration as existing assets. The 90-foot baseball field is acknowledged as a major asset because there's not really any alternatives of that size in the area, and there's good usage there. The basketball courts are an Narberth institution, and it seemed disruptive to plan for moving them just a little bit at great expense. And I think there was some comments from our public works director that they generally, they're not expected to be replaced in the near future, and it wouldn't make sense to re-engineer that site.
They're in good shape.
They're in good shape. There was some discussion over the Little League diamond, and in terms of whether it would, be turned into a dirt diamond, which my understanding from the discussion was that would enable softball in the future, and so they were kind of concerned about how that would interact with other assets at the football field, and I think that the general recommendation was that it was something that could be looked at, but it wouldn't be an immediate improvement that would occur, and that there could be further study and looking at phasing of that over time as the need emerges. The big discussion was over the skate park tennis court area. There was extensive discussion on that and the desire for tennis courts versus the desire for a skate park amenity. And so there was not, while there wasn't unanimous consensus on that item, the study committee generally, a majority of the study committee made the recommendation to go forward with a plan that involves looking at that space in terms of a skate park and then 2 pickleball courts for a portion of that. Our public works director had described how he thought that space could work. And so that was where the study committee landed in terms of taking a look at how that could be accomplished. The other discussion regarding the open lawn area that's immediately adjacent to the library, currently between the library and the playground. It had been shown on the most recent version of Simone Collins, the consultant's plans, as including the multi-use court space, and so the discussion around the way that the open lawn operates and the value of the open lawn. And so we made the recommendation to maintain the open lawn in its existing configuration and to relocate the multi-use court to the west of the playground, which is kind of the rough, the small basketball court area would be most analogous to kind of the multi-use court concept. And so that was recommended to go back over into an area that is west of the playground. Generally, we made the recommendation that was similar to what was shown in terms of having, noting that we would like to see improvements to the playground area as well. And then there was discussion of the consultants had shown kind of an addition to the library that was proposed to serve as restrooms, like storage area and potentially concession area. And the recommendation was generally to look at that just in terms of restrooms if we were going to do anything over there, just because of the spatial constraints. Once all of the other things are kind of accounted for, there are spatial constraints in terms of what can go into that area. And then obviously, I should have started with this one, but we started with the discussion of the accessible pathways to connect different parts of the park to each other, ADA compliance, and the ability for folks who have different mobility needs, folks of different ages and abilities to be able to make their way safely through the park, was something that we heard a lot of throughout the community engagement process. And so we recommended to continue forward with those. There had been kind of some concerns that we had heard regarding the removal of mature trees for some of those pathways, and so we made a general recommendation to minimize any impact to mature trees in the placement of those pathways. So before I move on, let me ask, have I left anything big out?
I think you covered it. And also, all of this will be posted online on the website too, in terms of the feedback. And then there's Station Square.
Yes, I'm gonna move, before I moved on, I wanted to see if I had missed anything there.
Well, I'll just mention that at the community meeting, there were a lot of questions about Narberth Park. I mean, I think a lot of skepticism over some of the larger changes, so, I think the committee listened to some of the community skepticism and community concern, and as a result, the final plan is gonna look a lot more like the current layout of the park than that.
Yeah, that
proposal did.
That was the general thought process, and we also put together kind of a here's what we heard document that hopefully summarizes as much of the feedback that we took in through the 800 survey responses that we received. We have a draft version of that completed, and I'm gonna circulate it one more time with our study committee members, just to make sure if there's anything that was missed in that document that it gets picked up. But so we'll have that available for the benefit of the public, but also for the benefit of the planning commission and for council, so that y'all don't have to read through 800 pages of comments, and you have a summary version available. In terms of Town Square Station Circle, there was extensive discussion regarding the impact of parking and different ways that those sorts of impacts might be able to be mitigated. And so we made a general recommendation to the consultant to take a look at the space in terms of if there's an ability to reclaim parking spaces at Town Square Station Circle while still being able to maintain a pedestrian-oriented space in that area. We did that in order to try to address some concerns about the proximity of having spaces that are proximate to the liquor store and other businesses in the area. There was a overriding kind of like discussion of the proximity to the liquor store as a downtown anchor. And so and then there was obviously discussion of the addition of spaces down on Haverford Avenue a little bit further down, and the potential to examine some spaces that don't currently exist on, I believe it was Essex, because we know that SEPTA is going to be relocating the 44 bus over to Montgomery Avenue permanently. And so my understanding is that there are some spaces that are not striped on Essex because of the 44 route. And so that might also be able to be considered as part of this process. So between those kind of different elements of it, the general thinking was to continue to look at it in terms of being able to provide a pedestrian-oriented space as a component of it, but since it's a big space, there's a desire to figure out a compromise that could also maintain some parking immediately adjacent to the liquor store. Obviously, it would be publicly available, but that being one of the concerns. Did I miss anything there?
You covered it.
Okay. That's the update.
Oh, and then it will go to Planning Commission in November for review of the final draft plan. And then after that, it will go to Borough Council in December, and it will be presented then. And then in January will be, that's the scheduled date, scheduled month for a vote on the plan.
All right, thank you. Public comment. We'll start in the room. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes. Please begin by giving your name and your address, and then you can begin your comment. And council members typically won't respond, but we may wait till the end of your comment and respond if you wish. So, we'll start in front. You should make a public comment. Okay.
Not right now.
All right. Well, this is the chance, right? There's only one
Yeah, I
public
know.
comment period. Great.
Okay.
I'll move the second row. Marie?
No comment?
Okay. Anybody else in the second row? Third row? Anybody wish to make a public comment? Go ahead, sir.
My name's
Stand up.
Brian Brzezina. I live at 510 Homewood Avenue. I am new to paying attention to this process. I did attend the Parks meeting online a couple weeks ago. Admittedly, I was listening to the Phillies game at the same time. They're going well, so I might have missed some things. But the park situation here I find very disturbing. I think public lands are, there's something you can't get back. And giving them up at all is incredibly short-sighted. I think planning our parks without including Sabine in the master plan is wasteful. A lot of what we're talking about here, you know, it's without knowing what's going on in Sabine, it's pointless to talk about the other parks. When we talk about Narberth Park, it sounds like an overcrowded plan, and if we knew what was going on in Sabine, we could take that into account and create a more holistic plan. So I think we need to dedicate ourselves to turning Sabine into a full park, and then come up with a true master plan for all of our public spaces.
Thank you.
John Constantine, 400 North Narberth. I will echo exactly what my friend here just said, except I've been in this town for 50 years. The population is about 4,000 now. There's about 1,000 kids, and they need to have more adequate space to play different sports, team sports. In 1977, the parking lot was not there in Sabine. Okay, we played Little League soccer there. Okay, there was full games for little, under 10, 12-year-olds that could play in those fields. We need more park space, okay? You advocate for it, but you spend $1 million for a little parcel of land that is a wetland, okay? You need to get on the ball with this. You've been here 2 years of silence. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I know you passed me, and I said no.
Feel free.
I'd like to say something about that park there.
Go ahead.
My daughter goes to St.
If you want to give your name and your...
Sorry, my name is Chris Balch, live 526 Brookhurst.
Go ahead, sir.
Technically Penn Valley, but I was born and raised in Narberth, been here for 60 years. And my daughter goes to St. Margaret's, and for a field, they have to go all the way out to Black Rock because there's not enough parks here for the kids that play around here. You can't use a park, and it is. I think our parks are a vital part of the community, and to give them up for any reason is incredibly short-sighted.
What sport does your daughter play? Does she have
Soccer.
Black Rock? Okay.
Soccer.
Okay.
And the softball also has to go all the way out there. And they have to do it at 6 o'clock at night. So it's just...
All right. Thank you. And
Certainly.
we'll move to online comment. If you wish to make a comment online, please raise your hand, and Mr. Gazzardo will call on you.
Lee Hawkinson.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'd like to just, stemming from the gentleman that just spoke, regarding the parkland. I just need you to clarify, Mr. Bush, when you speak about the property at 201 Sabine, are you referring to the commercial property that is currently there? I understand that what you were saying is in terms of the process, but I don't understand what exactly is being appraised. My father was a commercial real estate appraiser, appraising everything from the Philadelphia airport to Eastern State Penitentiary. What are we appraising? Because we're going back and forth, and I think you need to be clear for your constituents. Are we talking, because I re-listened to my recording here, and at 2 minutes and 15 seconds, you inserted facing Montgomery Avenue. Are we speaking about parkland, current parkland, because that is the only thing currently facing Montgomery Avenue, or are you talking about looking to appraise, and you're talking about the 1.5, 2 acres, the current commercial property that now has the Narberth Food Bank and I want to say Kinder Care because that's the new one. Wonder Spring as their tenants. Are we talking about the current commercial property, or are you saying that you're considering it is part of the conversation that you would take what is currently Sabine Parkland and look to make that commercial property? Please be specific.
You want to finish your comment and then I can respond? That's your question? So
that's my question.
It's all one big lot, right? The borough owns it, and right now it's a little over a 3 acre lot. So that includes both the commercial buildings, the parking lot, and the current parkland. So our sense is that the most useful area for a park, if we were redesigning this, the best area for a park is going to be facing Sabine Avenue. It's going to be the community area. That's where, facing our
park currently faces Sabine Avenue. I'm confused.
I'm responding. I told you to finish your comment and respond.
Understood.
Yeah. We are proposing to subdivide the property in such a way that there is a parcel that is facing Montgomery that is going to be the commercial area. And the park would be the area on the other side. The park would be the area facing Sabine on the west side of the property. We think that's the most logical layout of the space in the long run if we were going to divide the uses. I mean, you don't want a commercial property on Sabine. You don't want a park that's stuck on Montgomery, which is harder to access. The logical place to lay it.
Who doesn't want?
From a design point of view, that is our belief that from a design point of view, the way that most makes sense in the long run is to kind of swap.
You said we should continue to allow commercial use of the property.
Right now, you finished your comment.
We're not commercial. We're not using the park as commercial property right now. So I'm just. You need to correct yourself. We're not using the current property.
Your comment is over. I am responding. Okay.
Thank you. No, you said everything I need.
It's all one lot. So we are using right now a portion of the lot for commercial and a portion of the lot as a park. We envision 2 options, one of which it's all a park, the other of which it's also partly commercial and partly a park. We are proposing to segment off a portion on Montgomery, which would be appraised to determine the value of that, whether we want to sell it or not. That is the step we are taking.
So Sabine Park will be appraised in this appraisal process. Yep.
It is one lot. We are proposing a subdivision of the lot that would be, you're saying Sabine Park, it is 201 Sabine. That is the property. And Sabine Park is a portion, and there will be parkland on that site. Whether it's going to be in exactly the same location, that is to be determined. I believe that clears up council's intentions here. Anybody let me know if I'm not being clear.
Fred, I think, but the only thing I would add is that the interior park and green space would be on Essex. So it would be interior. And I want to be respectful if people get their 3 minutes and we mute them. But so saying that the commercial corridor would be rezoned facing Montgomery, which makes sense because Montgomery Avenue is a commercial zone, the expansion of the green space or park would travel down Sabine and be interior facing towards the community on Essex and Sabine.
I mean,
Not to go,
we're looking at more, how do we make more green space on this site? And
Correct.
the logical place for it is, facing the community, facing Essex and Sabine, facing the Narberth community, rather than stuck up against Montgomery, where
And traffic.
you kick a ball the wrong way and it ends up on the highway. I mean, so that's our logic, that's the way we're thinking about this, and that is what we've asked Borough staff to look into. Is there anyone else who wishes to make a public comment at this time? Please raise your hand.
Regina, go ahead.
Well, good evening, everybody. Yes, my question is about the skate park. I was wondering if anybody has actually figured out what percentage of Narberth residents will be using that skate park.
Again, if you want to make a full comment, we can choose to respond afterwards. So do you have anything else you wish to say at this time?
Oh, well, and my other question was this. Has it ever been considered that any aspect of these park plans be voted on in a referendum in one of our elections? They're my two questions.
Could you provide your address, please?
Yes, 223 Dudley Avenue.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll address the second one really quickly. We're limited by state law about what kinds of things we can hold a referendum on. They're mostly about taxes, so we can't really hold a referendum on a general issue. So there are only a very few things where we can have that kind of vote. Again, according to state law. And the first question, I think there were how many? Do you know how many comments there were in the public survey? I mean, I think the best way to judge that would be the number of comments in the park survey that referred to the skate park.
It was about a 70-30, so 70% were Narberth residents that responded to the survey, and 30% were either Lower Merion, so near Birth, or I think there were just a very small percentage and a little bit further than that. But
Yeah, it was about 95, so 70, it was like 70, a little bit over 70% of the survey respondents were Narberth residents, and then there were somewhere like 20 to 25% that were Lower Merion specific, and then there was, whatever the remainder is, a small number that were from other areas. I don't know what the breakdown is. There was a question about like if you're from another area, like how do you interact with Narberth? There were some folks who don't live here anymore there were various like connections. It wasn't.
There were also a lot of people who lived just outside Narberth that were responding to that survey. And do you remember about how many responded about the skate park?
So like I don't have it tagged to like individual. I don't have that level of specificity, but we did a question about like what sorts of assets people in their household use by age group, and the skate park was noted as a used amenity especially for children, which is ages up to 12, but then it also kind of continued for teens and young adults. It drops off like below the 20% threshold, which 20% threshold for any individual activity was like a pretty high one, but it only dropped off that once you got to individuals who were getting older. So I don't want anyone to think of that data as like a statistical representation of the community, because you obviously, you have response bias, you have various other things, so take it for what it is, which is we put it out there and we try to get as broad of a response as possible, and we're using it as kind of just an indicator of where folks generally stand. But from that standpoint, there was, in terms of trying to best get at that question without being able to have a specific answer to it, there was usage indicated, and then I know just from looking back through some of the historic materials, not looking for not looking for skate park related things specifically, but just in terms of going through some of the historic materials that we have in our unofficial archive that's being held at Borough Hall, that there were conversations in the past several decades, periodically in which local borough residents would ask the council for a skate park. So it had been something that had been discussed going back through at least the 1980s.
So to summarize the survey results, we have over 800 survey results, and the skate park was one of the top listed uses of Narberth Park for various age groups, up until the 20s, right? That was one of the
like the
top
common
few.
themes in terms of like the top ones by age group were, it varied over time, but skate park generally made the top 3 depending on the age group. Obviously things like basketball and baseball did as well. And it wasn't just just to make sure that everyone understands the way that the question was phrased, it wasn't just what are the assets that you use at Narberth Park specifically, it was what are the assets that you use generally in order to try to get a sense of what sorts of assets people might be going to other areas to use.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And is there anybody else online who wishes to make a comment at this time?
Lawrence?
Lawrence, do you want to go ahead? We'll come back to Lawrence. Anybody else?
He unmuted, then he muted, now he unmuted, so.
Well, Lawrence,
Yeah.
if you're there, feel free.
I am here, can you hear me?
Go ahead, yep.
Okay, sorry, it's Lawrence Goldberg and Serena Chen from 200 Sabine. Hello, everybody, again. So I see you're referring a lot to the survey that you did for the Master Parks Plan, of which you, for some reason, have removed the second biggest park in the borough. So obviously the survey must be important to you, but what I'm trying to understand is this. There's a survey that was done 4 years ago, and the results are on your borough webpage. And the results it was specifically about what to do with 201 Sabine and with the whole property. And they gave 9 options. And you surveyed the community, and the number one by far and away option was parks and recreation is what people wanted to do with the entire property. The 7th and 9th, i.e. the lowest rated items are the ones that you've been pursuing. So that's what I'm trying to understand. You asked a question. I don't think you like the answer that you got because you dismissed. It was done by a paid consultant. I believe we paid $15,000 to $20,000 for the survey. They were shortly after the survey results dismissed. The survey's on the website. The survey says that the community wants parks and recreation. I realize there's a financial impact, but what have you done to pursue that option rather than pursue the option that you folks seem to favor, which are the lowest options as far as the community goes? The second point I'd like to make is financially, you keep talking about, well, we need to raise the money for it. What I don't understand is that building has probably taken in $10 to $12 million in rent over the years. With the right hand, you've been collecting the rent, you've been spending it on other things in the general budget. With the left hand, you're saying, oh, sorry, we can't fix up the building, we can't tear it down, we can't convert it to the park because we don't have any money. You do have the money. It was said on social media by one of the council members that you collected $350,000 in rent this year. You're spending it in the general fund. 3 years ago, you decided to destroy the building. In 3 years, you've raised over close to $1 million, and it's 1.25 to raise the building. So you're simply taking the money that you're collecting with rent and spending it on other things and then saying, well, we can't do it. We have to put in more dense housing because even though it's the bottom of the list of what folks want, we have a financial necessity to do it. That makes no sense. You wouldn't run a business like that. You wouldn't run an investment property like that. And you shouldn't be running publicly owned property like that. You've taken in millions of dollars, use $1.5 million of the dollars you've taken in, convert to a park. If you've already spent it, then put it aside for the next 3 to 3.5 years. Put all the rent aside, wind down all the leases. You'll have enough money to do the demolition. Go out and pursue grants. Work with the community. Work with the Sabine Coalition. Work with folks like the Shade Tree Commission, with volunteers to do what folks really want. And it's not going to break the bank, but you haven't even tried.
All right. Thank you, Lawrence. Your time has expired. Anybody else?
I'd like to hear the answer to that.
I didn't actually hear a question from Lawrence.
Well, he asked why you didn't pursue it. He said you put up.
Sir, your public comment is also.
You asked him, the man asked the question. Your job as the council is to answer.
Sir, it's not, it's actually not, it's a public comment, it's not a question and answer.
It's optional for comment, for council to respond.
Okay.
And I don't have the results of that survey on here. I will look for next week at the results of that survey that Lawrence is referencing, because I don't have them in memory. Anybody else wish to make a public comment?
Arbor.org, it's on their website, it's on your website.
Lawrence, your time is over, please. Yeah, I just don't have it on hand enough to respond to you at this time, so. Anybody,
I think that's it.
Okay. I will look at it and I will be prepared to have a discussion on that survey if this topic comes up again in the future. Let's move on to presentation, no presentation items, consent items. Consent items. Someone like to make a motion for consent agenda?
Just as a note, F&A recommended approval of 11A. We did talk about making sure that that gets effective.
The schedule of bills? I mean, I hope so.
Right. Right, but we don't get to say it beforehand because we just did.
I mean, I don't think we need to work about recommending schedule of bills. That's something we have to pass every month.
Okay.
I move that Borough Council approve the consent agenda items A and B.
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion on the consent agenda? All right, all those in favor of passing consent agenda items A and B? Okay, it's unanimous. 12A, public hearing.
I guess we'll start this public hearing on the ordinance of Narberth Borough authorizing execution of the cable franchise agreement with Verizon Pennsylvania LLC. 3 exhibits. First is the ordinance itself that was discussed at last month's meeting. We went through the ordinance specifically in the terms of the agreement that we entered into with Verizon to give Verizon the right or ability to utilize our right-of-ways to run their cable system that we know of. 2 is the legal advertisement for tonight's hearing in this meeting, which was in the Mainline Times, published on October 6th of 2024. And Exhibit 3 is the proof of submission to the Montgomery County Law Library of the proposed ordinance, which was submitted on September 26, 2024. So again, what this ordinance would do would authorize the manager to enter into that cable franchise agreement with Verizon according to the terms that we discussed previously. There is currently an agreement in effect right now, so this will be a continuation of that agreement with certain terms changes we discussed. Any public comment? There's nobody in the room.
Have to be online. Is there anybody online who wishes to make public comment specifically about this Verizon franchise agreement?
Seeing none.
Okay.
Council have any questions, discussion? And with that, we'll close the hearing and we'll turn it back to the public meeting.
Okay. Our next item is the Verizon franchise agreement, 13A.
Motion time?
Motion time.
I move that Borough Council adopt ordinance 1064 authorizing the execution of a cable franchise agreement with Verizon Pennsylvania LLC.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? This has come up before in council. And this was negotiated for us by our, as part of a multi-municipal agreement. Okay, let's vote to adopt ordinance 1064, the Verizon franchise agreement. All those in favor? Okay, it is unanimous. 13B, school buses.
I move to approve resolution 2024-19, intergovernmental agreement between Narberth Borough Police Department and the Lower Merion School District for an automated enforcement program.
Is there a second?
Second.
Chief String?
So this is the agreement between the borough and the school district. The school district has already entered an agreement with Bus Patrol. They're the ones that install the cameras, do all the monitoring. They will send us violations and then officers will review them and ensure that 2 things, it's appropriate, B, that we didn't actually stop the violator and issue them tickets, that get 2 tickets in the mail. Based on it being a legitimate violation, we will issue the registered vehicle owner a violation under a different subsection, but appropriate to this new automated enforcement for school buses.
Keep our kids safe when they're crossing to get the buses.
So,
go ahead, Aaron.
So is it like the red light cameras where it doesn't actually become like a
Yes.
violation? It's a
It's a
ticket,
civil
a traffic
violation,
ticket, yeah.
right. It shouldn't raise your insurance, it shouldn't go on, it will go on your.
Not that I'm planning on doing.
No, and I don't believe it actually will show up on your driver's record either. It's just, I think, a civil violation.
I know it's definitely not, points is not under the normal, they have to pass a different section of the code for this.
Right, because there's not an officer observing it.
Yes.
So.
And I believe the fine is less than if you had been stopped by an officer. It's not quite as high as it.
It's substantially less, yes.
Yeah.
I will say that it's been implemented in other municipalities, and it's been very effective in decreasing the amount of violations. So I'm very excited that it's rolling out here. Do you have like an estimated start date?
It's in place, I don't know how many of the cameras are active, so once we get this approved, we can sign the agreement, send it back to them, and just figure out what time frame they need. So I can report back.
So this is like for when they put up the stop sign goes up or the lights are flashing and the car.
Somebody blows by.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, usually like the guy waiting and someone behind me is blowing their horn.
Yeah.
So.
When you go around, you'll pass the school bus, now that'll be a ticket.
I would very much recommend, once everything is in place, highly publicizing this so people know you're gonna be caught. And it's gonna cost you. So, no, just because you don't see a police car around doesn't mean you're not gonna be caught.
Do we control the fine?
No.
Or is it, no? Okay. So I was thinking we could just raise it up. It's under our control, because this is something where I have no sympathy for the offender. Okay. Any other questions for Chief Attorney? All right. Yeah, and I agree. I'd be happy to, I think we should publicize this in the Borough newsletter. Put a big little stop sign, You use that little, or get a picture of that stop sign that the bus puts out.
That's
Yeah,
interesting,
go
I mean, so we can't raise the fine, but can we attach an additional violation, a federal violation to it?
Administrative processing fee of $150.
All right, looks like we can. All right, ready to vote? Okay, voting on resolution 2024-19, an agreement between the Narberth Police Department and the Lower Marion School District to enforce bus safety. All those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you, Chief. Okay, budget amendment number 3.
I move the Borough Council approve budget amendment number 3 to redistribute 2024 budget surplus funds to the capital fund and fund additional expenses at a net change of $0 per the attachment.
Second.
Okay.
I get to talk about some good news. I am happy to report that the borough's EIT is on track to generate significantly more than what we budgeted for. And primarily that's the reason for that is since it's a pretty newly enacted EIT, we don't have enough long-term data to enable us to project really accurately what our budget line item should be. Those who know me like to go conservative with the numbers, put in a lower number, and be pleasantly surprised about this time of the year. Long story short, we are expecting an estimated additional $231,000 generated from our earned income tax by the end of this year. If you remember from the 2024 budget, the general fund reserves, to balance our budget, it included a $98,466 line item to balance the budget that was proposed to use out of the general fund reserves. This surplus from the earned income tax will bring that to 0. So the update will be zeroing out that general fund reserves, bumping up our earned income tax budgeted amount by $231,000. And then on the expense side, if you remember the last meeting I discussed, recommended that we not move forward with drawing down on that 4th general obligation note that the borough took out in 2021, just as kind of a a rainy day fund in case anything happened with 201 Sabine. We needed to draw down on that by October 1st. The 2024 budget included budgeting the entire principal and interest for that note for 2024. Since we're not moving forward with it, we paid it off. It cost us $28,000, so a net savings of just under $200,000 in that also. You heard earlier about the fuel issue with the diesel tank that is out of commission. There is a memo included in tonight's packet that's attached to this budget amendment request. Two parts to the fuel solution. First one is to get a back of the truck, smaller sized fuel tank that Public Works can use to drive down to the transfer station to fill that up, to be able to fill both our street sweeper up and our skid steer. Part two was to buy that fuel cube to support Narberth Fire Department operations. In discussions with Jeff Eldon, our Public Works Manager, we would like to move forward. We're asking for funding for both of those options, but our approach is to use option one, the back of the truck, and watch how that works for a good 3 months. We believe we will be able to fulfill the fire department's needs by just using that option. We might not need to go and actually purchase that fuel cube. I'd like to budget for it just in case it doesn't work out, so we have the money in the budget that will enable us to do that, to make that purchase. So that's included in this budget amendment. Also included is a one-time bump for our traffic control devices and street signs. If you remember, end of 2023, council passed an update to the parking regulations, which required us to purchase and install a lot of new parking signs. And that really exploded up our budget line item. And so this enables us to bump up, to absorb those costs, as well as absorb costs for anticipated purchase of mainline greenway street signs that we would like to make the purchase this year. All said and done, the big news is that the 2024 budget also did not include a transfer to the capital fund. I am recommending this surplus be used to transfer $300,000 into the capital fund. That would be a nice shot in the arm for our capital fund. Additionally, as you'll hear in my 2025 budget presentation starting next month, I'm going to recommend that Borough Council consider taking this approach for the next year or two until our EIT estimates become stable enough to know how much we should be budgeting for it. And you, at this time of the year, every year, look at any expected surpluses generated from the EIT to then be used for funding your capital fund. So I'm really happy about this. I'm excited about this. This is going to be a really nice investment in our capital improvement fund. And I am in the process of developing the capital fund for review and discussion right now.
Questions from, and then the infrastructure committee discussed the fuel stuff, right?
Right, yeah, I mean, well, but it sounds like they're going slow.
Yeah.
And seeing how it works.
So is the cube purchase, is that gonna come up before council again if you decide to make it?
It would not.
I mean, I might like the fire department to make the case for that if they want to, if you believe they might not need it.
That's why yeah. I mean, we did meet with the fire department to come up with this solution.
Yeah.
They were on board with it. But I think watching, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, watching our operations currently, knock on wood, it has not been that big of a deal for them to be driving their trucks down to the transfer station. So that's why I'm thinking that this back of the truck option really will be able to help the fire department.
I guess I'm saying rather than kind of authorize the fire department to do their thing, maybe we should just have them come in front of us if it doesn't work, authorize the purchase of the plan that you think will work, and then if it doesn't.
How much is a cube?
That was... Hold on. $4,000.
Okay.
Is that big enough that we want to worry about it?
That's why you're gonna let them decide.
I think council is willing to let the management decide on this, so,
Very
okay.
good.
Any other comments on the budget amendment? So our capital fund has a large number of projects that we have to do, particularly including the stormwater bump outs that are required by the state. And as you're saying, highway paving potentially in the future is going to be coming out of the capital fund.
Could possibly.
We have a lot of unbudgeted capital fund expenses
Yes.
that we need to figure out a way to pay for. So I think it's good that we'll be able to work on that goal. All right, I'm not seeing any other comments, so let's vote to approve budget amendment number 3. All those in favor? Okay, it is unanimous.
Thank you.
Haverford parking.
I move that Borough Council adopt the Haverford Avenue parking plan dated October 14th, 2024, prepared by Penelli Associates.
I'll second it.
Okay. I know Cindy was about to.
As amended, right?
As amended.
As amended.
Okay. What is the amendment?
We talked about narrowing the travel lane to maximum of 14 feet. And then adding a bicycle share at the intersection of Haverford and Linwood Avenue.
It's on the plan that's presented to you, Rick. It's just, I didn't know whether people had seen the earlier version, I just wanted to point out that we made.
Do we have some slides here or anything?
It was in the meeting packet, those plans. I would just say that staff met with the fire department to talk about turning movements, and they're generally in favor of this plan. Their concern is the 9 proposed spaces between Dudley and Conway, that before we go and actually mark them as designed, and per the recommendation of the traffic engineer, we'd like to go and park some trucks out in these spots to see if they can actually make the turns with the fire trucks. If not, we might need to shift them in a little bit, and so that we might end up losing 1 space. It might come down to 8 spaces between Dudley and Conway. So just, proof, if council considers this and wants to move forward with it, just know that the actual deployment of that area might change a little bit.
All right.
I also just want to make a comment. The plans for Station Square and for Narberth Park is still ongoing, and I do feel like this parking plan is related to those plans. So I just strongly recommend that the implementation is considered alongside those park plans. And I just want to know, whenever we add parking, they're very hard to remove because it becomes an expected thing. And so I just want to make sure that it's considered holistically with the whole parks plan. And this was in consideration with reducing some of the parking spaces in Station Square.
Yeah, I guess I would say that my understanding is that the downtown area does not have a significant parking problem at the moment, but there are a lot of vacant, storefronts at this time, and with our plans for Station Square, that may change. So this is forward-looking, the idea of providing more parking. It's not necessarily filling a crucial need right now, but down the line, it may become more necessary.
And if I'm sorry.
Well, go ahead, Andrea, and then we'll go ahead.
If I may,
If I'm mentioning businesses.
as a downtown business, I can tell you, there are a lot of vacancies. We have seen, there has been an uptick with the recent addition of Jenny's, because people are very excited and we're thrilled to have them, but it depends on the time of day. There are certain times of the day and when it does get more filled up than others. So we want a vibrant, thriving downtown business community, and perception of parking is half the battle.
And, that's also why council has been very aggressively making sure that we maintain some spaces in what is currently the Borough lot, behind 230 Haverford, that will be coming up later on.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I just want to address.
No, we don't have, what's that?
You may want to announce that tomorrow is the closing on that lot too.
Yeah, we'll get to that during, we'll announce it at council,
I know Cindy probably is gonna say this too, but I just wanna make clear that part of this is not just parking per se, but there's a dual element to calming mechanism. Especially at the upper end, I would say sort of in front of Conway, sort of coming down here. The street is very wide, there is a speeding factor there. One of the reasons to do it now rather than wait is, from my perspective, is from the public safety perspective. Just, there's no reason to wait on that. And also, a lot of the striping that we're doing further down is recognizing the reality of what happens when there's a big event, a ball field or whatever. We know that there's parking on both sides. We'd like to make clear where you can and can't park, especially on, would that be the north side, where there's overgrowth, etc. So people tend to sort of encroach into the roadway itself. And so part of this is trying to create some organization out of what often is chaos there. So, people, if somebody parks sort of on the street because they're going to a baseball game and then somebody else comes down and doesn't back right into them, right? Then there's sort of wasted spaces. If you ever go down there, it's, as I said, it's not regulated, so you end up, people might park a couple of feet apart. You actually are losing parking that would otherwise be available when you have the baseball games, the concerts, the other big events. So that's part of what we're looking at here, is just sort of, recognizing the practical reality that people are parking all along that road. We want to make clear and try and keep it organized. At the far end, there's no change as you get down to Wynwood. So we want to make sure that you still, especially with the bridge still closed, that people are going to have the opportunity not to get stuck in line, to have to make for the people who are making left turns, so that people can make the right turn.
Okay.
So there is a public safety element, and I think, there's a minimal cost according to Jeff and Public Works. I kind of disagree that, you put it there, creates an expectation. We can always take it away if need be. So I don't think we should wait on, especially the Master Parks Plan. I think it's going to take a while to implement. I think this is appropriate regardless of what we do with Station Circle.
Jim, sorry, 2 minutes.
Are these unregulated spots? Are they 2-hour spots? Are they
Currently unregulated.
So that's a little bit of concern of mine, is that, if they're freely available for any purpose at all, people might get used to them being there, for car storage or for, and it seems like a lot of these are well positioned to serve the business district, particularly the ones between Essex and Dudley. And if we're visualizing this, I would say appropriately, as supplementing business district parking, then maybe they should be, a little more focused. Maybe they can be 2-hour spots, maybe 15-minute spots. Maybe they, even if we were to allocate, someone mentioned at the public health and safety meeting that there was a shortage of employee spots.
I was just about to say, I left that out.
There's
One of the
a whole bunch of targeted ways we could use these spots right now, but if we make them unregulated now, it's harder, in my mind, it'd be harder to reel that back in later. You know what I mean?
I would have a solution for that, an easy solution for that. Just say no overnight parking. Or between
we
hours
certainly don't
of.
want storage, right?
Huh?
We certainly don't want storage, and I think you're right.
Right,
We'd have to
storage.
say no overnight.
If you have no parking between 1:30 a.m. and 2 a.m., you can't stay there with.
I think you would want overnight parking.
You would?
Yeah, right, because the concern that was just raised was about the hours where people are out and about. I mean, I don't know that we would have any issue if we're striping them as spots, right? A, if you're striping them as spots, the only way they operate as a traffic calming is when there's vehicles parked there. If there's no vehicles parked there, then the benefits of the calming do not manifest themselves. So there's that element of it, but also, I mean, we already know, right, that we have, it came up when we discussed the parking just north of this, in terms of that those were long-term residents on those spots overnight. And so if the concern is over kind of the active hours of the day, I think that we probably wouldn't have an issue with our long-term residents parking there overnight. The question was, you know, during the business hours, is there a way to regulate for that?
So I'll just note that we do have an ordinance now that covers our, like, borough-owned space, or borough-controlled spaces, that you can't just leave a car there indefinitely. Like, I think it past a week or something, we can tow if necessary. So we do have, you know, people can't leave a car there forever. You know, you could leave it overnight, but you can't leave it there for 3 weeks.
You could say, you could do a very short time frame, a half hour, between 1 and 1:30 a.m.
I would propose that we strike these, we see how they're used, and we return to this topic down the line. I really don't think it's gonna be a big problem to change it, you know, especially if it's in the first few months. If we come back to this in 3 months and we decide we wanna change it, we can change the hours, but I would prefer to proceed as
There's one
planned.
other advantage that I didn't get to mention, which is, somebody expressed concern, and I feel this way, and especially if we end up changing Station Circle, is we do not have any handicap spaces at all on the 200 block of Haverford Avenue, which is actually sort of shocking to me. And one of the advantages to this that I would like to consider is if we create these spaces then that would allow us to have at least one handicap spot on that block. It's crazy to me that we do not have a single handicap spot on the most important block in town. And what does that say?
Station Circle.
Right, but especially if Station Circle gets removed, but, you know, for anybody visiting the business, I would like to consider creating a handicap space.
Is there a sidewalk there? I mean, there's rules for your handicap space. I don't know if it's, you know, we can't just put it like along the side of the road with no sidewalk, I don't think. It would have to be somewhere where there's a sidewalk.
There has to be accessibility.
Yeah, so we can look into that.
You're talking about the north side of the street?
Yeah, so when.
Oh, on the north side. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there will be sidewalk.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was thinking of the south side. Yeah.
ADA compliant sidewalk right now.
Right, it's not now, but it would allow us to do that.
Yeah, but the reality is, the place for the handicap, for the ADA space, is now all the way down here.
No, that's what I'm saying.
It's right down.
I wanna be able to.
Displace another space.
Right, I'm saying it's replacing a space.
Oh,
If we lost a space up there, it's creating a need for another space down here.
Create a handicap space downtown.
Right.
I hear what you're saying.
That it would allow us to take us.
I would propose that we return to these ideas in a few months after we see how these spaces are used.
Yeah.
But is it, just to clarify one point, is it imagined that the contractor parking for the upcoming projects would be done in the back lot?
I'm not sure we've gone there. Do you have an answer for that?
I think it's
It
going to be.
seems like the logical place.
It's going to be a combination of that back lot and then overflow. We always offer the municipal lot here and this space down along Haverford, which is never parked up during the day.
Right, so it's.
And I just had a couple comments on this as well.
I mean, I'm sure if you're talking about the construction on 230 Haverford when it kicks off, I think it would make a lot of sense for him to use his own lot. I mean, or that lot that's right there.
That's gonna be convenient, that's where they're gonna go.
Yeah, so
I get it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this plan makes sense to me in a really specific context, so I just want to describe that context, so just that I'm clear on the record in terms of why it makes sense to me in that context. And that is that, you know, when we vote on this, I mean, I actually do think that when we put them there, it will be much more difficult afterwards if we ever wanted to reverse that space. So I'm approaching it from the way, from that perspective of to say that I think that probably these will be here for a while if you put them there. understanding that as kind of my starting point, this is also a proposed area for the mainline greenway as well, right? And it connects our two major activity zones in the Borough, which is, in my mind, downtown and the park, right? So it operates as a multimodal through point, or at least it could operate that way if we wanted it to. So to my mind, when we adopt this, we're making a policy decision for that space. We are saying that it will be a primarily auto-oriented space in an area that we know, or that based off of those adjacent uses and off of the plans for the mainline greenway and all of these other things, we know that we are going to be, that there will be encouraged multimodal use of the space. And generally, when you're looking at these sorts of improvements, if you're expecting multimodal uses, yes, on-street parking provides a calming effect, but it is the lowest tier of calming effect that you can get relative to other sorts of improvements that provide some sort of lane separation. So if you were approaching it from just a pure public safety perspective, this isn't the version of it that you would choose. So saying that, and I started this off by saying it makes sense to me in this context, and the context in which this does make sense to me is the context of Town Square Station Circle, and the conversation around that, and the conversation around that we had at the Parks Plan Study Committee, and the idea that even there, we're talking about reclaiming some of the parking at Station Circle in terms of not having that entire footprint of Station Circle just be a pedestrian zone, but seeing that we can get some sort of pedestrian-oriented zone right there. Because ultimately, I do think that, it's often said that your budget is a moral document. I think your right-of-way allocation is also a moral document, right? And right now, our right-of-way allocation in the Borough is almost virtually all, in terms of our streetscapes, auto-oriented. And we know that we have a lot of needs of different ages and abilities in the Borough. We had, when we were out there talking to folks at Station Square, one of the first groups of people that came over to us were some kids on a bike. They had never seen any of the Parks Plan stuff before, and we were just kind of like looking at things with them, and they were, they had concerns about some things because certain things were changing. And when they looked at Town Square Station Circle, unprompted, one of the kids said, "Oh, this is great, I won't have to worry about the cars so much over here," right? And I've had the experience myself with having my niece and thinking that I was gonna put her down in kind of the only space available in downtown Narberth, and then putting her down and realizing I made a terrible mistake, because in any direction she darted, she could immediately get clobbered by a vehicle. And I think about my grandfather as well, who had hit a certain age in Narberth and had his driver's license taken away, but he was still mobile in terms of his legs, and he could still actually get around town and get a lot of his business done, even though he was a veteran. And I'm not out here to say that even right now that's the overwhelming number in all. I'm not making any of those judgment calls, right? I'm not making any of those arguments. I'm just saying that there are definitely a segment of folks who get around in other ways, and right now we don't necessarily meet their needs in any meaningful way. And I'm not making the case that we should suddenly reorient all of our street systems or anything like that. Like I said, this makes sense to me in a really specific context, and that context is utilizing this as a way to address some of the values that have been articulated towards parking within the context that we're actually looking at trying to create at least one pedestrian-oriented space in our downtown. And so to me, that is one of the main reasons why I think this makes sense. Do I think, yes, we're probably making this a bit worse for multimodal biped? I think we probably are, but that is, you have to make those decisions sometimes when it comes to public policy. And I think that this is appropriate here for the reasons that Mike discussed earlier in terms of the ability down by the park where folks are already kind of parking helter-skelter and creating some order there, but ultimately it makes sense to me in the context of having the ability to provide some sort of pedestrian-oriented multimodal space in our downtown, without sending the message that those folks' needs are always going to necessarily be the ones being on the chopping block.
Thank you. So I think Cindy hasn't spoken yet, and then after that, I think we'll be ready for a vote. Cindy, you want to say anything? Or?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I mean, Mike and I agreed in public health and safety. I don't need to reiterate his words, but I would just kind of caution council to be hesitant to tie all of our actions onto a master park plan that A, has not been adopted by council. B, if it is adopted by council, it's an aspirational planning document that is years in the making, where we have not identified how we would pay or would actually do all of that work. I'm not going to hold back a vote or project because I think we would become paralyzed as a borough if we tether everything to this master park path. Right now, we know at a very low cost, in-house, we can add striping to a street, responding to residents and businesses concerned about parking, and use it as a tool to calm traffic. I'm very comfortable moving forward.
All right, everyone's had a chance to speak about this, so I propose we vote on approving the Haverford Avenue parking plan. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, it is unanimous.
I just wanted to say thank you, and that timing-wise of this, we're now in cold weather season, and so we're gonna have to purchase the materials. It's gonna be a minimal cost, signs and paint, but we can't paint when temperatures are sustained at a certain level, so just FYI, if we get a nice warm stretch, we might be able to get out there and put.
Monday, Tuesday's looking good.
There we go, see, so just saying, right, we're now weather dependent.
Okay, thank you. 13E is about a utility facility.
I move the Borough Council approve agreement number L552 between Narberth Borough and Pico Energy Electric Division for the construction and installation of certain utility facilities as part of the North Narberth Avenue Bridge Replacement Project.
Seconded, okay.
So this is one that I'm actually going to ask council to amend. Today we had in conversations with the project engineer, there is a forthcoming similar agreement with Comcast that we just did not have in time for today. And so I'm asking that council consider amending this motion to approve this agreement, as well as authorize me to sign the one that we expect from Comcast. It's just a way to keep the process moving for the bridge project.
All right, why don't you talk, so there's no financial impact to the borough?
There's no financial impact. It is a construction cost which will be 100% paid for by the Fed.
Okay.
But we have to front the money.
We would have to, we have to front the money, yeah. That's true for, or do we?
I don't believe so. I have not gotten a clear answer on that. I think from the last time I had a conversation with our PennDOT reps, I think we can invoice them, I think there's a way that we might not have to front the money. That we can, it's a paying thing, a process thing that we won't be on the hook for.
So we think we'll have to make the Amtrak deposit. But
Amtrak deposit is a separate thing.
Yeah, that's gonna, the borough's gonna be on the hook for an Amtrak deposit, but not for the regular expenses for the bridge. That's the current thinking?
Yes.
Okay. So back to this matter at hand, does anybody have, any objection to that amendment? Okay, would someone like to move the amendment?
So I'd like to move to amend consideration item 13E to include the authority to allow borough staff to sign a coordinated agreement with Comcast.
Yep.
Per the description of the borough manager.
Second?
Second.
Okay, any objection to the amendment? All right.
Great.
It's amended. Now going back to the bill.
This came directly from our project engineer. This is a crossing a T and dotting an I. This particular one in front of you today has to do with Pico Electric and their facilities on the bridge that they need to relocate through the project. And these are their costs associated with that work.
Any questions about this? Okay, vote on approving an agreement for installation of utility facility as amended. All those in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. 13F, applying for a PICO grant.
Right. I move that Borough Council authorize an application to the 2024 PICO Green Region Open Space Program 20th anniversary round for the diesel tank to electric vehicle charger project.
Second.
So there's a resolution that was included in tonight's meeting packet that is a boilerplate from PICO. PICO Growing Green Grant, they call it the 50th anniversary bonus round. There's $50,000 available for municipalities for single projects. I believe that we have a really good candidate in replacing that diesel tank and the 2 pumps with a level 3 EV charger. And we are requesting a grant up to $50,000. I believe our estimates are going to be well below that, but since that's the max, added that to the resolution, which is required for the grant application. Grant application is due October 24th, and we're halfway through it. We got the final quotes today, so we'll be working on that early next week to submit.
Is the EV charger on our capital plan?
It is not, but the fuel tank is. It's not on our 5-year plan. It is on the master inventory list.
Okay. Do we need to amend the capital plan and put it on? Is that gonna help our grant application?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Is there a match?
There is not.
Oh, wow. Well, that's good then.
Yes.
So if we get it, we do it. If we don't get it, we don't do it.
Well, if we don't get it, it might happen in a couple of years. We'll apply for another grant. Yeah, we won't do it next year. I don't think there's a need for a level 3 charger at the moment, but on the long term.
It would be a nice to have, not a need to have.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's a level 3 charger for borough-owned vehicles,
Correct.
not for the public.
That's right, thank you. It would be installed inside of our public works garage, yard, which would enable police department, future fire department, and any other future borough-owned EVs to charge secured, and therefore freeing up the other 4 locations inside, or located at the borough, outside of the library.
The police have indicated that in the winter, it's difficult to keep the vehicles charged and running using level 2 charger. So it would simplify, make police operations a lot easier.
Yes.
Level 3.
So is the grant, does it cover the cost of the equipment and the installation?
Yes.
Okay.
So it doesn't cover the cost of the electricity.
No.
Does not cover the cost of electricity, cost of removal and installation.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, let's vote on authorizing the application to the 2024 PICO bonus round grant. All those in favor? All right, it is unanimous. Do we want to get a letter of support from anybody for this grant, Matt? I mean, we could probably get various green groups to write a letter.
Yes.
Ready for 100 or the EAC will do it, but the EAC also Climate Action Arms and Ears, are they still active? All right. Someone want to put the word out to Gene, reach out to the EAC.
Sure.
Associated groups.
Put them in contact with me, that'd be great.
Let's get a couple letters of support for this grant.
Right, is this something we want to ask Representative Daley or Senator Capoletti for? Or is that overkill, Matt?
I think it's overkill.
Okay.
It's a PICO grant, not a government grant.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, we'll save that ask.
Okay. Information items, the monthly reports have been filed and are in the packet. Any new business? Old business, so as old business, I guess, as Solicitor Walcott mentioned, we are going to be closing with the owner of the 230 Haverford lot, Tim Rubin, for the sale of the parking lot. This has been, we've been negotiating this for several years now. I believe the current, or the immediate effect is he is planning to use the upper lot by the little gym for his construction. He's going to be working on the little gym, and he's going to be parking his construction equipment on that upper lot. So we anticipate that at some point that will be closed to the public while he does that. The lower lot is going to remain open to the public for the next several months. We will notify the borough through the borough newsletter about the state of that lot if that changes. But for now, there should be no, it might be a little tricky to access it, but the use of that lot is still open to the public to use as they have been for the last 15 years.
With our existing meters?
With our existing meters, yeah. The borough is going to be handling the meters. The borough is going to be handling the maintenance, and we have an agreement in place where the borough will also be handling snow plowing and things on that lot. So there are a lot of negotiations.
For the part that's being used.
Yeah, for the part that the borough is using.
And we keep the money?
Yeah, we'll keep the money. So we will more or less have control over that lower lot for the next few months. Although ownership will shift to Tim Rubin. So there is an agreement on file delineating the borough's responsibilities and Mr. Rubin's responsibilities. But for the public, what you need to know is that the upper lot will be closed at some point for construction. The lower lot will remain open. And then when construction starts on that lower area, the parking situation will change, and we'll keep the public informed.
Practically, the meters on the upper lot by the Little Gym building will probably be removed somewhat soon, and he'll have private ownership of that lot, so that will not be available to the public.
But he's going to give us our meters.
Yes.
Yeah, the borough owns the meters. The borough owns the meters. He'll probably put up some signs talking about what his parking rules are going to be, but it's up to him.
But you'll still have access to or from the lower lot as there is today.
Yeah. And I'm not sure exactly what his plan is to close off the upper lot. I'm sure he'll notify us. We'll make sure he notifies us, and we can tell people. Okay.
Well, but he can't. Can he start that project? Isn't there stuff he still has to finish on the existing projects, or he's done?
Yeah, he hasn't even submitted permits for 230 Haverford yet.
Well, the Little Gym building.
He's talking about the Little Gym building? Well, so is he allowed to begin the Little Gym building work?
There was a permit correction notice that went out today. It looks as though it's pretty quick. If they get their information to Kevin tomorrow, it should be issued tomorrow.
But there's no dependency on finishing anything?
Just the public improvements.
Which are done, or?
I believe so.
They are.
Okay, so he can begin work on the Little Gym. Sounds like it's
Right as winter
tomorrow.
starts.
Yeah, we'll see what he does.
Well, I guess it's interior.
It's interior work, yeah.
Building permit work.
Yeah. So the plan for the Little Gym is to convert it to apartments, and he's keeping the exterior as is, more or less. Well, no, as is.
As is.
So.
And the revival building, we should add.
Yeah, but he's not going to start on that for a while. Or is he starting the revival building as well?
Yeah, I believe it's the Little Gym and revival interior work.
He doesn't need the permit for the revival building?
I'm not in a position to answer that. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
In any case, the effect on the public is going to be the upper lot being closed down soon. And we'll keep everybody posted through the borough newsletter and through, I'm sure it'll become public knowledge pretty quickly. But
So we may be getting an additional retail spaces in the revival area if he's starting to work on that.
He just needs building permits for that. He didn't need a land development permit for that because that use.
he's keeping the exterior. He's keeping the exterior of the revival building. I can't remember.
No, shift is getting that done.
But he needed approval for the Little Gym building
Shift is getting that.
because of the change to the apartments.
Okay.
The number of apartments he has in the revivals building and the commercial use made it, so he's just able to do that by a permit without borough approval.
We will keep the community updated as we hear anything there. Any other old business? Okay. Comments for the good council?
Just a reminder, the Witches of Norbert scavenger hunt will be on October 26th, so Haverford Avenue will be closed down, as will a little part of the forest. There'll be 700-800 kids running around, so just be careful, have fun. And then the parade is always the night before Halloween, so it's the 30th. So, starting at 6 lineup, parade starts at 6:30. If anybody wants to participate in trunk or treat at the end, let Ed Ridgway know.
Yeah, any community groups or even individuals who want to hand out candy to throngs of kids, this is your.
You don't have to bring their candy, right? It's the candy's provided by the Civic Association.
Oh, is that right?
I don't know about that.
Oh, am I wrong about that?
I don't know about that.
I suspect you should be bringing your own candy.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can talk to Ed.
Okay.
I already tweeted it out.
Alrighty. We will have an executive session after this meeting to discuss a personnel matter. We will not return after the executive session. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All right. All those in favor of adjourning? Okay, we are adjourned. Hold on a second.